There's a photograph you've probably never seen. It's a promotional image from NASA, taken sometime in the 1970s. A group of people, a team, standing together in front of their work. And somewhere in that original photo, there is a woman, with the quiet confidence of someone who has spent years being the most competent person in the room without ever being allowed to say so. When the photo was published, used in materials, put on display, she was gone. Removed. No explanation. That woman is my guest today. Her name is Annie Easley. Most people have never heard of her. Annie, welcome.
Thank you. Though I should say, I've had a good life. A full one. I don't want anyone feeling too sorry for me before we've even started.
Noted. Let's start at the beginning then, because your beginning is one of my favourite details in this whole story. You didn't find NASA. You found a newspaper article.
I did. I just moved to Cleveland with my husband, and the pharmacy school I was planning to attend had closed, so I was looking for work. And there was a story in the local paper about two sisters, twin sisters, who worked at this aeronautics laboratory as human computers, people who did mathematical calculations by hand for the engineers. I read it and thought, I can do that. I've always been good with numbers. The next day I drove out there and applied. 2 weeks later, I had a job.
2 weeks. And when you walked in, how many black employees were at that facility?
4 out of about 2,500.
4. And you stayed 34 years.
I did.
I want to ask you something that I think gets to the heart of who you are. Because most people, faced with those odds, 1 in 600, would have spent enormous energy just managing the weight of that, the isolation, the visibility of being the exception. You didn't seem to do that. Why?
Because the work didn't care what I looked like. The equation was the equation. Either the numbers were right or they weren't. I think some people expected me to be defined by the ratio, 1 of 4 out of 2,500. But I wasn't interested in that ratio. I was interested in the problem in front of me. That's where my focus went. And honestly, that focus was also protection. If you're fully inside the work, there's less room for other people's smallness to get in.
Tell me about the transition, because you started as a human computer, doing calculations by hand, and then the machines came. A lot of people in that position would have been left behind.
That was the choice, wasn't it? Become obsolete or evolve. I taught myself Fortran, then SOAP, a programming language for early computers. Nobody offered me a course. The lab actually denied me financial assistance for college classes at one point, assistance they gave to other employees without question, no reason given. So I enrolled at Cleveland State and took the classes myself, full-time, while working full-time. I finished my mathematics degree in 1977. If they weren't going to open the door, I was going to build one.
That line should be on a wall somewhere. I want to talk about the Centaur, because when you describe your work there, you're relatively matter-of-fact about it. Energy conversion analysis, fuel system reliability. But I want to make sure people understand what that actually meant. Do you know the full list of what the Centaur eventually carried?
Some of it. By the time I retired in '89, I knew the program's history. Surveyor 1 landing on the moon in '66, the early planetary probes. But after retirement, honestly, I didn't follow every mission closely. You step away, life continues.
In 1997, 8 years after you retired, NASA launched the Cassini spacecraft, destination Saturn. The Centaur rocket was its upper stage booster. Cassini travelled for 4 years, nearly 1.5 billion kilometres. It spent 13 years orbiting Saturn, discovered active geysers on one of its moons, sent back images of a planet that no one alive had ever truly seen up close. The code you wrote, the energy conversion work you did at your desk in Cleveland, that's part of what got it there. Did you know where that was going to end up?
No, you resolved the problem in front of you. Where it goes after that, that's never yours to decide. You do your part of the equation. Someone else does theirs.
Part of that code was applied to the development of the first batteries for hybrid vehicles, technology that ended up inside cars driven all over the world today. Saturn, the moon, and the open road, all from the same desk.
Well, someone had to do it.
I have to ask about the photograph, because it's the detail that stays with me most. Not because it's the worst thing that happened to you, but because of what you did with it.
They took a team photo. Standard procedure. NASA used them for promotional materials. And when the photo was published, I had been removed. Wherever it appeared, I was gone. No explanation, no conversation, just absent.
How did that feel?
Humiliating. I won't pretend otherwise. You work alongside people for years. You contribute to the same project, and someone, somewhere, decides that your face in that image is a problem. But then I had a choice. I could let that define my relationship with the work, or I could remember what the work actually was and what it would become. And I chose the work.
If I can't work with you, I will work around you. You said that.
Exactly. I wasn't about to walk away from something I cared about because someone else was small. That would have been letting them win twice.
You said once in an interview that you never felt like a minority, that you just had your own attitude. Where does that come from?
My mother. She told me from the time I was small, you can be anything you want to be. It doesn't matter what you look like, what your size is, what your color is, but you have to work at it. She didn't promise it would be fair. She promised it would be possible. There's a difference. I held on to the possible. You know, people ask me that, and I think they expect me to say something about courage or struggle. And yes, there was struggle. But the honest answer is simpler than that. I walked through that door because I had a job to do, and I knew I could do it. I didn't feel like I was a minority when I sat down at my desk. I felt like a mathematician. That's where my focus went. The work.
There's something almost radical about that. Choosing to define yourself by your competence rather than by how others are defining you.
It was a survival strategy, but it was also genuinely how I felt. I'm not saying the discrimination wasn't real. It was. But if I had organized my entire identity around other people's smallness, I'd have been working for them, not for myself. And I wasn't willing to do that.
There's one more thing I want to tell you, and I don't know if you know this yet. In 2021, the International Astronomical Union named a crater on the moon after you. Easley Crater, 5.5 miles wide. On the far side of the moon.
On the moon?
On the moon.
My mother would have loved that.
What would you tell her if you could?
That she was right, that the possible was real, that I worked at it, and that somewhere out there, past anything either of us could have imagined, the work is still going.
Annie Easley, mathematician, computer scientist, rocket scientist. The woman cut out of the photograph, whose code reached Saturn, whose name is now on the moon. This has been Coffee with Unknown Giants. Share this, because that's how hidden figures stop being hidden.